JKB, back with another episode, and today guys, I'm going to be reviewing Watch Dogs Legion. And first of all, I want to thank Ubisoft for the review code.
This will be a spoiler-free review. The story of Watch Dogs Legion focuses on the London branch of the hacker group known as DedSec, as they fight back to restore freedom to London, which has been taken over by a private military group. You play as you play as everybody. I mean, that's the crazy part of this game. There isn't really a main character, but instead you build a team of hackers that you've chosen by profiling people on the street in the open world. The idea is simple. You can profile anybody in the open world and choose characters based on how they look, how they dress, how they act, or because of their gameplay abilities, skills, and gadgets. This sounds like a gameplay mechanic that just wouldn't work based on the fact that Ubisoft would have to do voice acting and animation for every single character you see on screen. However, this is exactly what they've done, and it seems to be exactly what they wanted to do, and it's very impressive. You can look at this idea like every character in the game is a weapon in this giant RPG set in London. It comes down to the fine details that can help you during missions, such as, let's say, a construction worker. If you're in a mission that requires you to infiltrate a construction site, you'd want to use somebody that's dressed in construction gear. So you'll want to go out and find somebody who's got construction gear on and recruit them to your team, switch over to them, and guess what? You'll blend in to this environment better, and you'll have less guards looking out for you. It's just one of these little gameplay elements that you don't expect, but it's in the game, and it's pretty cool to see. Building your team will be the most important aspect of the game, and one that you should focus on right from the start. You should really build up a team that has unique abilities that you think you'll want to play with, because if you don't do that, you'll have to go out and collect a new team member every single time you kind of want to use a different ability. So start the game building a team. At the start of the game, you'll be asked to look for a few different members to join your team. Once you've tracked them down in the open world, which I should point out is not locked from the start, you'll be able to get them to join the team by completing a mission that they'll ask you to do. These missions could be all sorts of things. They could be just hack into their neighbor's computer or get some information off of somebody that's walking around. Quite simple at times, but other times, if you want somebody that's a little bit more sophisticated to join the team with better abilities, you might have to do a mission that's a little bit more difficult to complete. As for the story, I'll keep this short. It's actually a lot more mature at times than any of the other games in the series. Overall, I enjoyed the story because I was able to sort of make my own adventure by choosing the characters I wanted and picking them along the way. No two players of this game will have the same characters, and that's one of the very interesting aspects of the game. Without giving away anything in detail, I'll say I was happier with the story here over the past two games. Overall, the story is quite enjoyable. I had a great time meeting these new side villains and the main villain, and seeing these stories kind of revolve around each other and how they connect is interesting, and you kind of get a James Bond sense of scope at times because it's set in London. You also get the underbelly of London there with some gruesome evil villains in the game. Overall, the story is pretty good. I had a great time with it, and it is something that you'll definitely enjoy over the last two games. As for customization in terms of your character, you'll notice that each new recruit will have its own gear and abilities. You'll also be able to switch gear in real time from anywhere in the map. You'll also be able to switch to any person on your team at any point. However, if you're in the middle of a battle or a mission, or with cops around you that are looking for you, you'll have to escape that situation before switching over to another character. Another cool aspect of the game is permadeath. This means if you have a character on screen that dies by being shot or just beaten to a pulp, you will not be able to retrieve this person. They won't go to jail, they won't go to the hospital and just be unplayable for 15 minutes in the game. They'll be gone forever. So this is something you want to look into after you've probably beaten the game, because you do fall in love with a few of the characters on your team, and seeing them gone forever is just crazy. It's like the demon souls of Watch Dogs. You'll just be so depressed if your main character that you know and love is dead. You'll also be able to shop for gear such as shoes, hats, jackets, and change the look of you and your teammates. This is something that you'll want to do. It's really cool to be able to match your team to kind of look similar to each other, to kind of make this sort of like hacker group. Kind of like the movie Hackers, except not as cheap. Well, it is kind of cheesy. It's cool. I like doing it in the game. You get money, obviously, by completing missions or using a little spider robot, which I'll talk about later, to find money around the map. You can also just kind of go shopping if you want. There's so many different shops. Now, however, you can't really go into the shops. There's just this sort of board, I'd say a digital board outside of the shop that lets you kind of peek into the store and look at items on your character. That's cool, but you can't go into the shops like any other major games now that are, massive open worlds. They kept that to a minimum. A lot of people ask me about the open world battles and how it felt to go up against the cops and your wanted level. And it's gonna, again, come down to how you play the game. If you don't understand how to play a Watch Dogs game and you simply drive around without using your hacking skills, that isn't much fun. But once you understand that the world and the environment around you is to be hacked and use that as your main weapon as you're trying to escape from the police, the game opens up to be this amazing, just action-filled chase. And I mean, at times I've just had a blast. It's like being James Bond and having cars that have guns in them, hint, hint, if you recruit the right member to your team, of course. As for London itself, the map is massive, and like I said before, it's unlocked right off the bat. You don't have to worry about going into a locked zone. You'll be able to visit any part right away, and within this map, there's tons of things to do, besides, of course, the main missions. I should also point out that I played on a 1080p television in my room for the most part, but I was playing on the Xbox One X, and that's the footage you're seeing here. However, I did take it into my main room with my 4K television, and I did notice that the atmosphere looked so much better playing in 4K on my Xbox One X. Now, I don't know the actual resolution of it, but it looked incredible. And again, the atmosphere and just the overall, effects of the game looked much better when I was playing on the 4K television. The main line point of playing this game is the hacking. You're able to hack into anything. If you see a bank machine, you hack into it to get some extra cash to buy a pair of shoes. If you want to hack into a bus just to watch it crash into a bunch of people on the side of the street, sure, go nuts, hack the bus, move it forward at full speed, and it'll crash into anything in its way. If you want to take control of a drone and simply just follow a person around from a distance to be able to see where they walk and how they're walking around the mission you're about to do, go do that. You do whatever you want in the game using the hacking ability. Now, as for the missions in the game, you'll be able to complete them doing the usual things you've done in past Watch Dogs games. You can hack your way in, or you can go guns blazing. It's always going to be up to you. It's also very important to do some recon before just jumping into some of these missions, because there's a ton of different levels now. They seem to be going vertical, so they'll go into the basement where the servers may be, or they'll go to a rooftop where you'll have to use a drone to do your recon. It's very important to hack into everything, look at the situation, and determine what's the best course of action to take to get the objective done. As for the enemy in the game, they have a different layer to them. So you might run into a simple guard who's not really dressed up in a lot of gear, and they might just be at the front desk. Those people you can take out by simply punching in the face. However, you get later into the game, and it seems to kind of bump up the challenge a little bit. You'll run into guards that have more bulletproof armor on and gear that will repel your attacks. So in terms of enemy types, they're the usual that you've seen in Watch Dogs games in the past. There's nothing here that's going to blow your mind. There's a few surprises though, so that's nice to see. Now, I think we've all come to expect the different missions and the variety of missions you'll see in a game like this, and you're hoping it's not going to feel too repetitive. While there's tons of ways to do these missions, I feel like once you've done one mission, you've sort of have done them all. As for the missions themselves, you will notice that they are not repetitive, but you'll always be doing the same thing, of course, hacking into the building or entering a building and simply deleting a file or obtaining a file. It's always going to feel like you've done it before, and it's just going to change the way you accomplish the mission and not really the mission structure itself. Now, one of the cool aspects of the game that I absolutely loved using was the robot spider that you can toss down at any point in the game, which kind of changes the whole gameplay from being obviously a third-person, hacking shooter game into this sort of robot mini game where you're running around the map from a different point of view. Yes, it's third person, but you're gaining access to the buildings and opening hatches and going through vents in the wall just to reach tech points, which are used to upgrade your tech in the game. Tech points are the most important thing to get in the game. You want to collect them when you see them on screen. You'll use them to upgrade your gear, such as the robot spider. You'll be able to upgrade him to have a double jump. Her, I should also say, maybe the spider's a her. I don't care if it's a him or her, do whatever you want. But this will keep the game balanced. You'll also be able to upgrade your weapons and, like I said, all the gear. So if you want your gun to have a silencer, upgrade it. And how do you do that? Tech points. I should also talk about one major aspect of the game that I haven't even brought up yet, and that is the flying drones around the world at all times. There's a bunch of different models, and of course, over time, you'll be able to hack into any of them and control them. You can even take some of them and fly around the world by simply hacking them and jumping on top of them. They're that big that they can also pick up crates and drop them on enemies during missions. It's a blast to do in the game, and I highly suggest you look at some of the tops of the buildings because you'll find little secret missions on top as well. Having drones in the game does give it another level of gameplay that's interesting. Look at them as another tool to use to complete your missions and have fun with the game. Overall, Watch Dogs Legion is trying to do something new by letting you decide who the main character of the story will be. While I think this idea is interesting, it's a little strange at times because you'll be in the middle of doing a mission and maybe you're taken out by a guard. You'll be able to switch to a new team member, which is cool, but the game really has no good way of explaining how the new character is randomly in that location within the map. The hand-to-hand combat is weak, to say it lightly. I would have liked to see something a little deeper when it comes to the fighting in the game. I mean, you do come across some underground fighting, sort of like fight clubs that are pretty cool to see, and you go up against different characters. But this doesn't really unlock, like, say, new combos or the ability to do a different punch. All it really does is lets you recruit these fighters to your team, and then, then they'll do different moves. But I mean, one thing I have to say, it's kind of weird to see all these characters in the game do the sort of same thing. I mean, it's hard, obviously, to have everybody do something differently in terms of animation or even, like, kicking in the game. But you'll see a lot of the same animation on the characters, which kind of is like, okay, I've seen this. There's also puzzles within the missions where you'll turn these little nodes on a power network to unlock doors or hack computers, and while this is cool for a side mission, I did run into this puzzle during a main mission, and I had a massive node puzzle that was just really... It just slowed the pace of the game down, which is fine, I'm not complaining about that, but it frustrated me because I just couldn't figure it out. Maybe I'm just bad at this, but I had to point it out because I think some other people out there will be playing the game and suddenly run into these sort of side missions and be like, oh, I gotta do this now to progress, and you have to do it. You got no choice. It's impossible for me to explain everything I wanted to talk about in this review. It's just impossible. I'll leave it at this. The main story is alright, while being better than the last two games. I enjoyed it, I like the twists and turns, I like how gruesome it can be at times, because I'm a fan of horror, and it's fun to complete it. I mean, I don't want to give anything away, but it is definitely worth playing for the story. It's going to come down to the missions, the open world, and the characters, and it's safe to say I ran into characters that I absolutely adored and loved. And the animation on some of these characters, you can tell is unique. It's not just somebody at a computer randomizing these things at Ubisoft saying, okay, this one smiles differently than this one. No, these are like little quirks that the characters have, like biting their lips or the way they look, like, off to the side. That's unique, and I kind of fell in love with characters because of that. The open world is huge with things to do around every corner. I do have to say, though, there's kind of huge stretches on the map where there's not much to do on the map, and it's just that way. There's no other way to explain it. It does look stunning at times, to say the least. I do think it's the best open world Watch Dogs game yet. And lastly, the missions, like I said, they do feel very much the same to one another, but it's the fact that you have so many different ways of completing them that kind of keeps it fresh. I did notice a few different frame rate issues at times with some screen tearing and a few glitches, nothing that ruined the game, but it's worth mentioning. And the music is alright. I mean, if you're into British bands, you're gonna love the game, because guess what? That's all you get while you're in the cars. That's it. British. I'm gonna give Watch Dogs Legion a solid 8 out of 10. While it's definitely not a perfect game due to some pacing issues within the main story, and also a little bit of awkwardness in terms of main character, and the fact that you can switch your characters out, it just feels weird switching between the characters at times where you're in the middle of a mission and you die, or you're taken out by a guard, and suddenly the next character in line is just there and waiting. It just sort of takes you out of the game, and there's no way around it. There's an AI character known as Bagley, who's always on the audio, talking in the background, and he's sort of there to divert your attention away from the fact that you're just switching characters all the time, and at times it's a little awkward. So 8 out of 10 for me, and if you liked my review, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next episode of JKB.